Epstein had allegedly told her that it was about, quote unquote, having something on them, making them indebted so that those individuals would then be in his pocket, Israel's pocket. Oh, sorry. We don't know that for a fact.
So Candace Owens recently revealed the stunning truth behind Epstein's blackmail operation on behalf of Israel. She gets into some of the testimony leading her to this opinion from Virginia Giuffre, the now late victim of Epstein, and some of Epstein's connections to Israel. So let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Israel and child sex predators, it's kind of a thing. It always has been. Hence, Epstein. Oh no, I can't believe I said that. I'm sorry. The Department of Justice has no idea if Epstein has ties to any other nations. They don't,
Oh, yeah.
They don't know. So how could we know if our Department of Justice doesn't know? Yeah, Trump isn't going to demand that that individual comes back and faces any charges because he couldn't even muster the strength to look America in the face and say, yeah, Epstein was working for Israel. If you can't do that, why would we expect he's going to do the other thing, right? And what makes the Epstein story even more incredulous is, of course, first and foremost, the fact that he was an open child predator, is the fact that he's been protected by so many countries, all of the leading countries, the United States, France, Israel, Ukraine, where he was running girls from. I mean, in case you don't remember the story of Virginia Giuffre, that story in and of itself was absolutely crazy. But again, these patterns are starting to emerge and we can recognize them. It's making me feel very disgusting that I ever engaged in fashion, modeling, Hollywood. Like, I haven't engaged in it, but the fact that like all of us look at this culture of models and fashion and Hollywood, and we saw it through we were starry-eyed. Oh, amazing. Look at this fashion designer, the clothes they're making. Look at this beautiful model. Look at Hollywood. That entire pipeline, you realize it is starting. The picture that I'm seeing is that it's a ring. At least if you're looking up Jeffrey Epstein's story, there's no question about that.
Yeah, Ian, and Epstein's associates too, like Jean-Luc Brunel, who founded a modeling company, and he blew his, he committed suicide supposedly by hanging like Epstein when French authorities came knocking at his door, charged him, and were holding him for sexual crimes. He was an associate of Epstein, almost never talked about anymore in relation to Epstein. Even the DOJ and FBI memo that talked about this said, Epstein had no clients. Well, I'm pretty sure Jean-Luc Brunel was a client. And she's right. Lots of entities have protected Epstein. Epstein actually fled to Israel for a time before the details of his sweetheart plea deal were worked out after his first arrest. He had, been preparing to move assets and money and wealth over there and ready to invoke the return law, which is a law in Israel where you can cite your Jewish heritage as reason to gain citizenship. And she's right. This isn't escaping the notice of people that follow this story, nor are Epstein's connections to Mossad and the IDF and his close associations with Maxwell and Ari Ben-Menashe and Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi and Ehud Barak, who lived over at his house for prolonged periods of time after he was convicted of child sex trafficking and molestation, I should say. And that's what we know about it, and Pam Bondi seems to have no clue about it. But those of us looking at this case and actually scrutinizing it have found that to be true.
Anyways, Virginia, she was an American girl, as you guys know. She was born in Sacramento, California, but she grew up in Florida. The story goes that she was abused as a child by a family friend, and then she developed anorexia before running away from home. And as a runaway teenager, she's obviously the perfect, quote unquote, modeling type. So what happens next is she then gets discovered on the street by this guy, Ron Eppinger. If you want to go down a dark hole, the fact that that man is unbelievably protected by our government, but he's now dead. But he was the owner of a modeling agency, which turned out to just be another human trafficking front. The agency was called Perfect 10. He then makes Virginia his personal assistant, but, also gets her addicted to drugs. So she's 13 years old, just 13 years old. She becomes addicted to drugs, heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, codeine, Vicodin, morphine, you name it. He was just pumping her filled with drugs. And then when she turns 14, he offers her to one of his wealthy clients. But then she gets lucky because the FBI swoops in and they arrest Ron for child prostitution and money laundering. Then she gets put into a treatment center in Lake Worth, Florida, which eventually had to close its doors because it was discovered that they were actually using these tactics of brainwash and torture and physical and sexual abuse on people that were trying to get clean. Somehow she makes it out of there with the help of her family members, and that's the next part of the story you may have heard. Her dad was working for Mar-a-Lago at the time. He then gets her a job working at Mar-a-Lago with him, except she's going to work as a masseuse. I want to be super clear here. Virginia, in all the testimony that she has given, has never once accused President Donald Trump of anything. She was working there because her dad was working there. That's the story that she told, and she was naming names, so I tend to believe that.
Yeah, that is true. I will say, her life was so hard and so horrible in so many facets, not even just after she met Epstein, but before she met Epstein. Man, this person's life was a whirlwind of tragedy and crime and darkness that it's so sick. And just how she ended up, and looking at, her as a victim, she truly is the victim of victims in this case. And it's just so sad to consider that.
But it is true that while she was working there, she was then approached by Ghislaine Maxwell, who offered her a better job working for a wealthier man who was always in need of a masseuse. Yes, of course. I'm speaking about Jeffrey Epstein. At that time, she was just 15, but she kept a journal, and she recorded that Jeffrey and Ghislaine wanted her to, quote, be able to meet all of the needs of the men that they were going to send me to. They wanted me to produce things about them in addition to sex. They told me to pay attention to the details of what these men wanted so that I could report back to them.
And just think of that. A lot of the stories related to the Epstein case are kind of steered in the direction of, no, this was just about Epstein, his own perverse desires, his own crimes, his own child molestation. But they wanted her to report back to him. And she's documented on the record saying that this was blackmail. They wanted information, the dark secrets of these people outside of just the sexual exploits. This is documented in her depositions and in her interviews when she talked about being the victim of these crimes. So every time you hear, whether it was the Biden administration or the Trump administration, the recent DOJ memo that said, hey, there was no evidence that Epstein was involved in blackmail. Well, it's stories like this that really throw a lot of shade on it. And it's no wonder why there are so many skeptics to people that are like, no, you're outright lying. For the record, I'm one of the latter. They're outright lying.
End quote. Years later, in 2015, under a sworn testimony, she claims that her actions were intended to compromise and to potentially blackmail targeted individuals, powerful men, of course, and that Epstein had allegedly told her that it was about, quote unquote, having something on them, making them indebted so that those individuals would then be in his pocket.
That's blackmail. That's exactly what it is. That's dictionary blackmail. And it's not that different from the strategy that Epstein learned about playing the box. That's what it was called at Bear Stearns when he got into money laundering operations. It was the idea that if you get people to commit crimes, but get them to do that in a manner that's embarrassing to them, you can even commit crimes. And if it's a matter of embarrassment for them to reveal the crime you commit, you will get away with it. You won't be touched in it. And there's a pattern that goes through Jeffrey Epstein's life, runs completely through it, where this is the case. He wasn't touched for so long. The sweetheart deal that he got from his first charge is the biggest indicator of it. But also in other cases, like when Towers Financial went down, he was in an operation with a guy named Stephen Hoffenberg. The two worked together to produce the greatest Ponzi scheme in U.S. history, one of the biggest ones in terms of the sheer amount of assets. Hoffenberg went down for that for 18 years and Epstein escaped unscathed. Why? Well, he was touched by the hand of Midas, as Candace often puts it.
Israel's pocket. Oh, sorry. We don't know that for a fact. But don't worry, there's no client list, so there's nothing to see here. In fact, Israel, in case you missed it, is the most moral army in the world. Say it with me. The most moral country, the most moral army in the whole wide world. If they wanted, they could just drop a nuke and kill everybody in a day, and they haven't done that. So much morality.
Oh, wow. How gracious of them. The country with the secret nuclear weapons program in the Middle East, bombing other countries on the basis that other country has a secret nuclear weapons program. and the secret carve-outs for them in regard to owning that program are not unescapable from our imaginations. It's America's greatest ally in the Middle East.
I am overdosing on morality. It's like too much morality for us to even look at. And yeah, so much morality that they have to now effectively gaslight us about it, which is what I feel like is happening right now. Even in terms of where I tell you guys, like, Chat GPT is just trying to get rid of history. It's just so obvious. Like, it lies about everything. All of these AI, Grok, they lie. And then when you say, hey, I actually know this fact, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I missed that in Robert Maxwell's approved biography, like things like that.
Yeah, I guess whichever AI you use, it defaults to being the less incendiary toward anything Israel does or Israel's connections to anything. But look, I really appreciate Candace for covering this, especially when it comes to Virginia Giuffre's testimony pointing to a blackmail operation here, which this was, probably on behalf of Israel. And it's not just some conspiracy theory. Again, it's clear that either Pam Bondi hasn't looked into this at all, or she's looked into this and she knows the truth, how connected that Epstein truly was to Israeli intelligence. And it's not just because of what Giuffre said, it's what Ari Ben-Menashe said, famous journalist. He was a Mossad asset. He said that Epstein not only was a Mossad asset himself, that Epstein had told him that, but also that he was running blackmail operations. And Ari Ben-Menashe himself was a former Israeli asset as well. We know that because we've seen his passport. He's produced this actually in court, showing many multitudes of different stamps from visiting different countries, whereas the Israeli intelligence said, no, this wasn't our guy. He never worked for us. He was a low-level translator, essentially, for Mossad. But, you know, the passport proves otherwise. He was definitely involved in some of these operations. It's Epstein's connections to Ehud Barak, who lived at Epstein's home for prolonged periods of time. Remember the home that was valued at $77 million that he acquired from Les Wexner, the biggest private residency in Manhattan itself? That was the residence that Ehud Barak stayed at. Epstein even paid Ehud Barak $2.3 million to produce 2 essays, one of which he didn't finish. There were clear money exchanges happening between the two men, and there are a lot of signs that point to a connection between him and Israel. I think he was an access agent. An access agent is the kind of person that gets around people of prominence and gathers compromising information on behalf of the government in which that you are an asset for, likely Israel. He was also the protege of Robert Maxwell. What do you know? And the links don't stop there. We know from what Alexander Acosta said, after providing that sweetheart deal, I was told Epstein was intelligence and to lay off. He was above my pay grade, essentially. But who did he get that order from? Because there wasn't many people above Alexander Acosta. There was, Alberto Gonzalez, who was the attorney general at the time, but there weren't many other people above him at that time. He has been evasive about answering that, but all signs point to Epstein's connections with Israel. They're not just, conspiracy theories, they're documented, and the fact that this administration doesn't tackle that subject whatsoever is telling. The fact that they don't tackle the fact that Epstein was a highly skilled money launderer is rarely injected into the equation or the conversation either. So again, glad that Candace covered this story. I do want to hear from you. Do you agree with Candace Owens on this? Was Epstein most likely working for Israel? Why has this story gone away? Is Trump paying the price for it? Ultimately, will he lose out and the Republicans lose out on it in the midterms? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Candace. Thank you so much for having this program. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return, I'll give you access to all my members only videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.